Welcome, 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 attendees. My name is Sandra Hall. I am going to be facilitating this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Guy Hall here, who is going to share his T5 Tesla Tijuana to Tundra tour. Guy has a little bit about him. He has had an interest in electric vehicles since about 2009, and he first purchased an EV in 2011, the Nissan Leaf. The Leaf's arrival caused some great discussion within the family as they negotiated who got to drive it every morning. Everybody was very excited about it. The family then became a 2 EV household in August 2012, and they replaced their Ford Taurus with a Chevy Volt. In case you didn't know and you couldn't tell by our last names, Guy Hall is my father. So I was the one fighting with him about whether I got to drive the Nissan Leaf or the Chevy Volt. It was quite the discussion every morning. But welcome, thank you for joining us for this webinar as he tells us about his Tesla Tijuana to Tundra tour. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box or yes, put them in the chat box and we will get to them at the end. We are recording this video. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, he might end up dropping off also because of some internet connectivity issues. But if you guys all just bear with us through that, we'll make sure that he comes back and can finish his story. Guy, would you like to take it away?
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Boy, it's exciting to be here with everybody and to talk about this really fabulous adventure. Now, you have to realize that this is back in like 2014. The Teslas were still new on the scene, but I want to back up a little bit to think about how this whole idea of driving up to Alaska started. So when we first did get our Tesla Model S and back in 2014, trying to figure out, well, something interesting that we could really do with it, something that hadn't been done before. And I, let's see, yeah, and so we had in our living room a picture of my grandfather and his brother, who made a milestone of going across the state of Missouri in 1909. Oh, a whopping 427 miles. It took them a day and a half to do it, and you can see all the mud that they were in and the challenges they faced in doing that. So I thought, what can I do that would be kind of like that? People had already gone across the U.S. and up across Canada, California and such, but what can I do with different? And I thought, let's go all the way to Alaska, up through the Yukon, British Columbia, the Yukon, in the wilds up there. Let's show that it can be done. So kind of mapped it out, and this is a kind of distance that you have to go, and it's not a short trip. I thought I would go all the way down to the southern border and then turn around and then head straight north until I got it almost as far as you can go into Fairbanks, Alaska. So this is what my big worry was. In fact, I kept this under wraps. By and large, I said, I don't want the images of my trip to end up looking like this. In fact, there was someone that tried it in March of that same year, or April of that same year, and said, hey, it's not possible. You can't do it. There's not enough electricity up in the Yukon. And he was quite discouraged on it. But I thought if I do it maybe in July, August, more things will have opened up and I will be able to succeed at this. So I did take it a shot, and luckily I did not end up like this. So think about preparation. Before going, I just started to think about what is it that I need to make sure that I pack with me and to lay out my route to make sure I'll be successful. And there's a terrific, gosh, it's like a book that's updated every 6 months or so, about an inch thick, that lays out all the routes and all the stops along the routes when you're going up through from the U.S. border up into through Canada into Alaska. And it's a special issue, and this is really, if you ever think of doing this, which I really encourage, is to get this Bible, critical for you. The other thing I thought is if you're up there and there's nobody around, and you'd like to to let someone know where you are, and if you're in any kind of trouble, you don't need a full satellite phone, but you can do sort of a text messaging and tracking device by Garmin. And this then would track my progress so people would know where I was. And I could even text message a call for help. So it was fun to have. Just left it up on the dash where I could see the satellites in the sky and forward. So other things that need, I thought about is if I stop somewhere, nice to have a little bike so I can go out and see the surrounding areas. So nice fold-up bike in the back. A variety of adapters, all kinds of adapters, every kind of adapter you can imagine, because I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to need when I got up there. And I know it had been done. There's you can see a tow cable there, rope. So I know that not only you can possibly tow my car if necessary, but you can charge. I can charge it while you're towing me with my regen on. Unfortunately, I didn't need to verify that, but I had heard others specifically use those. And of course, an extension cable and a tire flat fix kit. What I debated about getting the spare tires, but I thought up in the up in the Yukon and in Canada and Alaska, they do have tire problems, and so getting the tires shouldn't be too bad. This device, unfortunately, was not yet available, so I couldn't use any CHAdeMO fast charging that I might find along the route. And they were putting a fair number of those up in Canada. Like we made a custom mattress to be able to fit in the back, so I could jump back there to sleep and take a nap. Now this is what really scared me. I kept hearing about bears that smell food in the car and they just tear open the car. And especially the Tesla is made out, most of it is aluminum. So I can just see a bear coming over and peeling over my car. So I talked that over with a few people. They say, hey, no problem, just bring a gun. Well, when talking to any of the Canadians, they said, don't even think about it. Don't even go close to that kind of, may not even get past the border if they know you have a gun. So we instead went ahead and just did airtight containers for food. And we never had any close run into any sort of bears. So just a little overcautious there. And then last, a lot of the road up there is chip seal and loose gravel on the road, even though it's paved the whole way. The gravel, I always worried about the gravel coming up, either being kicked up by a truck or another car, damaging mine. So I did a full wrap, a clear XL wrap around the car. And by the way, that seemed to have worked really well. Either it worked really well or I was just lucky. You can never tell. So here we are, kind of loaded. You see in front of the back seat there is a suitcase and ready to take off. So the first trip, just going down to the Tijuana, the Mexican border, I didn't actually go into Mexico. Turns out that they don't like to insure cars that are more than $50,000 when you go into Mexico. So we just went down here to the border, waved at the crossing there, turned around and headed north. Now going through the US, with all this, the superchargers and such, not an exciting story in that aspect. It's getting pretty traditional. Won't spend much time on that. But I will talk about, this is where I started entering into Canada. So crossing the border there, and this is kind of the route. So this is the interesting part of the trip, from the Canadian border all the way up to Fairbanks and through there. That is much more interesting. And we'll spend some time on this part. I gotta say, some of those beautiful scenery is just north of Vancouver and such, and north of the border. Absolutely gorgeous. As the roads follow these inland seas, and they call it the sea to sky highway. Just you go from this beautiful inland bays all the way up to the mountain peaks, and just gorgeous to drive along it. And stopping at different places, taking in the sights and the activities. Squamish, which now has several superchargers, not only at Squamish, but in that area. So just a piece of cake, get up there and enjoy this, wonderful part of the Canadian, British Columbia location. So next, going further north, it's typically the sort of mountain towns, smaller communities, always something interesting to see for them to share. Beautiful carvings here. And also, we talked with Tesla having destination chargers. You can find them up there at, this is a mobile home park, where they would have the destination charger right there. So the lower part of British Columbia was not too tough. It was pretty easy. And this was one of the first nights that I spent there. So now, charging strategy. What am I going to do when I run out of the J1772s and the fast chargers? What's my approach? Well, the first is to locate any recreational vehicle park, an RV park. And they often will have, you see there, they have charging, just plug in, charge up your car. Often there'll be a place to, you can even rent sort of like a cabin and stay the night, or sleep in the back of the car for the night. So that's often, I found many of these is because RVs are a very popular vehicle to take up through into Canada for families. You can leverage those the same power for those. The second one, and this is a little bit more, it was a little more fun actually. You find any business has electricity. It could be an arc welding business. It could be an auto shop. Anybody that's got hopefully 240 volts. You find them and you just pull up, and we show them the Model S, and they kind of gather around it and all kinds of questions and curious about it. Then you let the owner there or the manager there say, hey, offer them a test drive. Hey, do you want to take this out and give it a try? And they love it. And we go out and we spend like 5 minutes, 10 minutes out on the road having fun. They get to feel what an electric car is all about. But then here's the key: is you come back and you ask them, can I buy some electricity from you? Of course, they're all universally say, absolutely, we won't even charge you for it. Just plug in and take what you need. And so that was a really highly effective one. So this is one example of this is a auto shop. I got to tell you, the people in Canada were so friendly and so helpful. So I went into this auto shop, showed them the car, and we talked about it, and they were keen on it. Then I asked about the being able to charge it, and the manager said, no problem. And she took me over where they had 240 volts, and couldn't believe it, but I did not have an adapter for their outlet. I had like 10 of them, but I didn't have the one that they needed right there. So she said, no problem. We'll just make up an adapter. So she turns around, walks outside, and then she walks down across the front of their facility over to a butcher shop. And she goes into a butcher shop. And I'm standing there. I'm not sure, was our conversation done? Am I supposed to follow her? I mean, what's this about a butcher shop? I was kind of confused. So I waited a little bit, then I kind of went into the butcher shop, and I found she was talking to the manager of the butcher shop, who also owns an electrical supply house. So he took off his apron. We jumped in the back of um, his pickup, drove to the supply house. Now, I didn't realize at the time, but this is the first day of a 3-day weekend coming up. So I was not the first day, but the evening before, the late afternoon, evening. So he goes in, turns on the power, shuts off the alarm system. We start pulling things off the shelf, gathering a basket full of pieces and components. I go up and gave him the money for it. We left. And then we came back to this auto mall, the auto shop, and on the top of an upside down 55-gallon drum, we're cutting wires and splicing and wiring up these chargers, and he's there helping me out, and we're making this adapter. And meanwhile, his family is in their SUV, 30 feet away, waiting to go on their 3-day vacation. But he's there helping me out, someone he'd never met before, helping make the adapter. It's just so friendly and helpful. I couldn't believe it. So the manager's the woman on the right, and this guy from the butcher shop is there on the left. So we got it all plugged up and working, but you have to be flexible. And again, as you're going along, just more highways, beautiful lakes. I mean, how can you go wrong with the scenery in Canada? So getting further north, this is one of their parks. And you take this wooden walkway across this meadow, and you end up in this beautiful wooden structure with hot water, hot springs. And they're just barely, they're so warm that you can it's hard to even stay in them very long. It's just wonderful just to experience. And it's at one of their national parks. No commercial establishment anywhere around it. It's just out in the wilderness. And it's open 24/7. So I did try going down the middle at midnight, because I stayed at a little guest house nearby, and walked out in the middle of the night, and there were a couple other people there at night. So again, a lot of things to discover and experience with. And yeah, here I am actually there where it's dammed up a little bit. Now at this sort of hotel, you can see, it's not uncommon as you go further north, there's electrical outlets. And I thought, well, these guys are really ahead of the times. They're ready for electric cars to charge in. Well, of course, they're not built for electric cars, but they'll work fine. But they're there to warm up the gas engines during the middle of winter when they need to warm the engine block. But they work fine to help me charge overnight as well. So another source of electricity. I generally discovered that you can find electricity almost everywhere. So that's good. And here's actually crossing into the Yukon. And as you go further and further north, of course, fewer and fewer establishments and commercial, and it gets to be more exciting to find your locations. And as you go along, also you'll see there's lots of history. You can see how they built the whole the Alaskan Highway, which is what takes you from down in Canada up through Canada, the Yukon, and into Alaska. So a lot of interesting historical activities. So I said, this is your typical RV park. Now, for those that haven't been to an RV park to charge, something important to learn. you want to learn it before you go. So they have RV parks with 30 amp electricity and RV parks with 50 amp electricity. Now, one might think that, oh, well, 50 amp means you're, not quite twice as much power. No, not true. You are quite a bit. The 30 amps are always 120 volt or it's 110 volt. And the 50 amps are always at 240 volts. So it's a dramatic difference. So you really bias yourself to toward the 50 amps and try to go to the RV parks that have the 50 amp circuits. And I found out if I asked them, do you mean 240 volts? And they say, no, they're 50 amps. So that's those are fixed terms that all RVers know, I think. So there you are. Again, this is an example of an RV park along a beautiful river and such. So just always a delightful visit. Now this is a case that I called them ahead of time and asked if they would have space. And they said, yes, absolutely, come on up. This is the front of an RV park. I got their information on the phone. And I said, do you have 50 amp service? Absolutely, yes, we have 50 amp service. Great. I was looking through the general RV catalog, and it showed their site and advertising for their site, and it said 30 amp service. So I call them up again. I say, are you really sure you've got 50 amp service? Of course we have 50 amp service. So I arrived there late at night, and this looks like it might be, 6 o'clock, but remember, you're in the Yukon, you're pretty far north, so this is more like 10 o'clock. And I start walking around looking for an outlet that was a 50 amp plug. And I'm walking and no luck. So I go and knock on a sign that said it was the caretaker's cabin, and ask, and this young Asian woman, early 20s, comes out, and I ask, where are the 50 amp services? And turns out she doesn't speak English, but she's got a little box that converts English into Cantonese. And so I said the box 50 amp service, and we went walking all around here looking for it. After about 20 minutes of hunting, we went back to the similar cabin and woke up. I think it was her sister, and she came out, and we went looking. Well, finally, one of them found something inside the kitchen that was put in for a deep fat fryer. So I'm going to back the slides up 2 points. So I backed up the car to the porch there. We ran a cord through the window into the kitchen and plugged into that outlet. So, and the car started charging up like a champ. Great. Took out my little bicycle, and I had a reservation at a little motel not far down the road, and went to spend the night. But in the middle of the night, or around midnight or so, I thought I'd check the status of the car. It's not charging. And so I get on the bike, get dressed, get on the bike, ride down there, knock on her door. She brings out the little translator box. I say, where is your electrical panel? So we go to it, and sure enough, the panel had flipped. And I look at it closely, and it says 30 amps. Although it's 240 volt, which is good, it still said the panel was 30 amps in spite of this outlet being configured for 50. So we reset it. We go tell the car only charge up to 30, and we go on. But it takes a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of ingenuity and patience when going out here braving the wilds. Now, a lot of these RV parks have got, they don't have high powered lines to them. They have their own diesel generators. And you'll often see them in pairs so that they can shut down one generator while they repair or refill the tanks and run the second generator. So when I charge up at one of the RV parks that have electricity generated by this, it's not particularly clean fuel, I have to admit. But this is not uncommon when you get up there. And so then cross the border. I spent some time with the border guards, and they got to look in the car and showed them where the frunk was, which was a new area for them to explore. Anyway, so we continued on, going up through here. Then we start getting, as we get back into the US, again, more power available, easier to find. And right outside of Fairbanks is apparently the U.S. Post Office has a branch at they call it the North Pole branch, which is just outside of Fairbanks, Alaska. So I had to take the obligatory picture of the car up at the North Pole. Now, once I was there, I started engaging with newspapers and radio columnists union members, city officials, all kinds of people to talk about electrification. And it made some big news there. I mean, this is on the front of the Fairbanks daily newspaper, front page above the fold. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. Good picture. And that's us in front of the Canadian Alaskan pipeline there. So while I was up there, did a whole bunch of test drives, had fun with people doing that. And then returned. So that got me all the way up to Fairbanks. And that was visited family while I was there. On the way back, I was not going to track back the same way out on land. They have a ferry that runs down the coast of Canada and stops by Alaskan towns like Juneau and such. So I took that back. It's a very pleasant trip as you're sitting out there watching the landscape going by instead of you having to go by the landscape itself. Now this is kind of cool because I went to the people loading the cars, and I went up there early. I asked them, "Can I get a picture of us putting the car into the ferry? I mean, this is like the first time we've ever done this, and can we jump out and take a quick picture?" They said, "Absolutely, absolutely." So we not only jumped out and took a couple of pictures, we spent like 20 minutes while the rest of the cars all in line waiting for us. They were curious about the car. They got in and looked around, all kinds of photos with it. Here it is where the car deck is. And you can see finally letting the other cars come on board. So that was, it was exciting for everybody to have seen these electric cars the first time. And further down, it's getting to Juneau, to the capital of Alaska, along that ferry route. There is another newspaper article and journalists and such. And in the background of this photo, you can actually see there's a glacier, so be able to drive up, see, and then hike out to where the glacier was. So a great experience. And what the ferry would do is it would stop at all these different towns along the way: Skagway, Juneau, about 8 different towns along the way as you're going south. And you can drive your car out of the ferry, drive around town, or hike, hoof it. But I decided to always take the car out and show off the EV in town. So again, just beautiful going south on that ferry. Everywhere looking around, it's gorgeous. And then finally back into California, visiting a family reunion that was all coming together. And there they are, finally welcome me on the way back as I drive up after being gone for some 9 days from crossing the Canadian border. And last thing I'd like to mention, if anybody would like to do this, to repeat this and give more information, it's getting easier and easier. Of course, there's more and there's fast charge. There's more even J1772s that are being deployed. The batteries and the range in our cars are typically growing. So where I had 265-mile range maximum, now there's up to 400. So it should be more of a piece of cake. And again, more of the RV parks are upgrading from either from nothing to 30 amp service or all the way up to doubling up to the 50 amp service. And anybody that does that and beats my time from the border to Fairbanks, we will give an award for the first 5 people that beat that time. So just let me know. And just send me a note to guy.hall@sacuv.org. And Sandra, I think Oh, just curious if you had this is the distance from the metrics from the border, Canadian border was it was about 9 days, over 2,000 miles, but all the way from the Mexican border, 12 and a half days, over 4,000 miles. So there you go. And I think that's it, Sandra.
Yes, that is it. Thank you so much. Honestly, I've heard this story many times, but I love hearing it every time and how you are able to, the struggles you go through of trying to find places to plug in, but the way that you make friends the whole time and everybody's all excited about the car and wants to take it on test drives. So
it was a bunch of fun. I mean, what you've got up there is a combination of beautiful scenery, a lot of interesting things to do, and wonderfully kind and friendly people. So it's I highly recommend it as a road trip. If you have any questions on preparations, let me know. So any questions in there at all, Sandra? Are we pretty confident?
yeah, there actually are. Excuse me. We have one question. How do you think this trip would have been different with a non-Tesla battery electric vehicle?
Well, it's just, can the let me see back up. So in the 48, the lower 48, and the lower part of British Columbia, the superchargers are really helpful, no doubt. But once you get above those, then it's fast. It's level 2 charging with 40 either 40 50 amps if you can. I think it would be in any car. The key should be what's the range of the car. So there's a number of cars now that are at 250 miles and up that would do just as well as I could. So I think the only other thing is you might look in the other cars is, do they have a place for you to nap and sleep if you're somewhere overnight?
Now, to that point, my Bolt is, you'll see it right behind us here. I had purchased it with the idea of laying down the seats in the back so that I could do some sort of long drive like this, only to realize that my seats don't lie down flat. So I think that is a very important point you make about making sure you have somewhere to sleep.
Yeah. And hopefully some of them will start adding this ability that, like Tesla has the camper mode, which I didn't have at the time, to be honest. But it's nice to be able to run the air conditioning and heater.
I'm sure. So another question, any tire problems along the way? And did you carry a spare?
Well, I thought about the spare and spent a lot of time talking with people, anguishing about it and debating, because it takes up a ton of space. But, they, and perhaps this was just naively thinking about it, but all the other cars will have that same issue. So I anticipated there would be plenty of tire replacement places sort of in Canada, even up in the more wilderness area. It may take a day or 2 days, 3 days to get it. But I got lucky and didn't have a problem. So
alternatively, I remember a story where you took another vacation in the Tesla and you did not get so lucky with your tires.
Yeah, that was on I-5, a major California, Oregon freeway. And it turns out that at least on the Model X, the tires are fairly unique. And not only the tire got punctured as we were driving along the road, but the bolt went through the rim. So we acquired a new rim as well. So we ended up sitting up in Portland, which is not a terrible place to be stuck, but for about 3 or 4 days, and we got all that stuff shipped to us, and Victoria flew back, she had to get back to work. So
a note from a participant here says modernspare.com makes kits specifically for Teslas and others, I guess for spare tires as needed.
Well, that's a great thing to know.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, where were you in 2014?
So another question we have here, what season did you go in when you did this? And
well, that's important. When you're up in the Yukon, because the Audubon reported that when he tried to do it in April, he failed. I went in the latter part of July and August, and it was a delightful time of year to be up there. By the way, in California and the West Coast, where so many of us are experiencing all this smoke, there are fires that are up in Canada that are running forever. They don't even try to put them out anymore. And there are some of the towns I went to were just into this, smoke haze, and and this was back in 2014. So interesting to discover that then too.
Yeah. So another question, what do you wish you had done differently?
Well, that's a great question.
You haven't agonized over this?
No, I haven't, because it was really successful. I guess I would have liked to publicize it more up front to get it to have it visible while I'm en route. And as I said at the beginning, I went stealth because I was just really afraid that I would end up on a flatbed truck. But having gone through it successfully and such, I would definitely try to publicize it, have publicized it more up front. But everything else went really, really well.
Nice. Do you have any other plans to take another fantastically long trip like this again?
Oh, I think I'm just sold on going up through Canada. So we're going to probably, as Victoria, my wife, retires, we'll probably go across the southern part of Canada, and also repeat this trip going up north. So it ought to be fun. I'm looking forward to it again.
Very nice. Very nice. We have a comment here saying that the governor of Alaska continues to threaten to shut down the Marine Highway ferry system. Less frequent surface and fewer stops now. So you have to watch out.
Wow, that's a big deal, because it's not just part of the transportation, but there are cities along the coast there that have no other access than that ferry system. Maybe there's some other ferries or some other ships as well, but I've known Juneau, Alaska, the capital of Alaska, which is down to that like panhandle of that part of very eastern part of Canada that Alaska stretches down into. They're a wonderful location, and they've got a whole bunch of Nissan Leafs. And you think, Nissan Leaf? Why would you have a whole bunch of Nissan Leaf? In Juneau, there's nowhere you can go outside of town. You're never far from a charging station. They have like 100 Leafs up there, and they're really popular, and they've got a really strong chapter of the Electric Auto Association there. They've got, but it's, for any car, they even has a range of, under 100 miles. It's a delightful town to live in with an electric car, and you don't have to worry about the car warming up or being stuck somewhere. It's just, anyway, it's very popular, and ironically so. But I think they would find it terrible if you couldn't. Yeah, I don't think. Maybe there's an airport there. I don't. Maybe there must be an airport, but there's no way to really get in and out unless you're four-wheel jeeping it up across the mountains somehow.
Mm. So, did you do a blog for this? And can people visit it still?
I did. Someone and I will. I'll send that out to all the participants.
Great, great. Well, any final tips for our participants that are interested in doing one of these trips?
Oh.
I know you just gave a bunch of tips, but what's maybe your number one tip that you think you should not forget?
Stop and smell the flowers on the way. I was always hyper concerned about range and getting there and maximizing my effectiveness, but it's such a beautiful place and so friendly people. Stop, hang out at some of the bars, meet people.
Post-COVID time.
Sites. It really is. I was always thinking how fast can I get my car charged up and go. It's such a wonderful location and trip. Take your time.
Fantastic. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Oh, I see a couple that popped up. I saw a gray Model S parked behind you in the Juneau photo. Did you meet that driver?
I did. It's the only Tesla or electric car that I saw on the trip getting up into Canada. That was one driver. He had of course, the car was shipped in, and yeah, we talked for a little bit. And so I thought I'd have to park the car, two Teslas side by side, the only two Teslas, not in the whole region or maybe the country at the time. Well, that would be an overstatement, but that was fun.
Was there a EV community there in Juneau?
Well, in Juneau especially, there is one, absolutely. We keep in touch very heavily with them, and they're a very active chapter of the Electric Auto Association. In Juneau, Alaska, this small town, has already got DC fast chargers in it. And they got some donated, I think, from Nissan.
Wow.
So they're very active, and it's such a wonderful car to have up there.
And
I'm sure there's a bit larger variety now, but even so. What were you going to say?
Do you keep in touch with all those people that you've met?
Yeah, not as close as I ought to do. I'd probably start picking that up again as we start thinking about going north again. But they were some marvelous people. In particular, I want to stop by the butcher shop.
Yeah, they were very helpful.
I couldn't believe it. You know, we're halfway through making the that adapter, and I look over and I realize that's his family in the RV next to us, or the SUV next to us.
They were probably just as excited. Oh, like, oh, goody, we're helping a Tesla man.
Yeah,
an
an
EV.
Tesla man, you can argue, I guess, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please reach out to me if you're interested in taking that trip. Since I did not, I was driving very slow and cautiously and didn't have as much charging available. Anybody that wants to do the North Pole Challenge should be able to easily beat it and get that trophy.
One last question for you. How do you think going south would help your range?
How do I think going south? Not sure. Maybe I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you, Sandra?
No, I do not.
Can you unmute him? And
it's from an anonymous attendee, so whoever gave that question, if you can elaborate, that would be great. Mexico versus Canada, I guess.
Well, I guess going into Mexico, it's a good question. I don't know the answer. I do know there's superchargers in Mexico, and there's quite a bit of activity for EVs in Mexico, but I can't say that I'm at all smart or have given that any thought.
Maybe there's also less headwind in the south?
Well, I mean, it could be tailwind too, right? Oh, by the way, that's one thing I should have mentioned. There are apps.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk. I need your permission to help.
Sounds like Alexa was listening and trying to help or something.
Yeah. Anyway, there is an app. You can look online for apps that give you the wind predicted wind speeds, and that's driving into wind is just like driving faster on a road. It will affect your range.
I am going to, for anybody that is interested in participating in a challenge, this North Pole challenge that Guy is mentioning, I'm going to drop his email in the chat for you to send him a message. It's guy.hall@sacev.org. So please send that out, send your interest to him, or if you have additional questions or want some clarifications, then I'm sure you'd be happy to answer them and go over all the specifics again with everybody. Great. Well, thank you again for sharing your story. As I mentioned before, I love hearing it every time you share it. It's very entertaining. So thank you for everybody that was here to listen and sharing your questions.
One thing I'd like to add, Sandra, is everybody would like to encourage you to go to driveelectricweek.org. We have about 100 different sessions throughout the week, all kinds of topics, things related to EVs, from air health and air to which EV is right for me, right for you, technology, history of EVs, across the whole board. Just tremendous selection of things to find out about across the week. Informative and entertaining and energizing both. Thank you, Sandra.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday here. Goodbye.
Bye.